A spacious bright room of the palace in blue tones. A green-haired girl dressed in a beautiful blue dress sits at a tea table and thinks about something. Her maid looks down from the balcony and says that the future of the empire looks bright. She sees a young lady and a boy accompanying her. The maid raises her hands to her face and continues enthusiastically. "Isn't this a blessing, Lady Saria? Saint came down from heaven. This is truly a blessing from above." A girl with short brown hair and a blonde young man heading towards the palace stop for a moment. Saint, as the maid called her, was frozen. Her companion takes off his coat to give it to the lady. He throws a palo over the girl's shoulders. She laughs shyly. "By the way, this blonde young man is Saria's fiancé." The maid notes that he and Sviata have grown close. After these words, the green-haired woman, who has been sitting quietly until now, clenches her teeth and bangs her fist on the table. Then she angrily says, "Callus, you're a freak. It's only been a week since we got engaged." Saria paints pictures in her imagination in which she pulls out a young man's hair. The girl really wants to do it right now, in front of the saint. But she holds back. This is not the time to figure out a relationship. If the series goes to deal with Callus, there will be a lot of people watching. The maid smiles. Green-haired says that her fiancé is too communicative. Suddenly, the girl starts coughing. The maid is frightened and immediately runs to her. It seems to her that the hostess has not yet fully recovered from the cold. She promises to prepare a medicine for the green-haired girl a little later. The maid barely has time to finish when a low male voice interrupts her. He says, "Most likely you will spend the whole day on the terrace with your patient." The series squints to the side, trying to see the arrival. He turns out to be His Eminence, the Archduke of the Empire, Glick Berg. He is a silver-haired man with red eyes who looks a bit older than Lady Saria. He is dressed in a dark blue, almost black suit. The Archduke does not pay attention to the maid, but approaches the green-haired woman and addresses her. The girl stands up, bows to the man and asks, "Yes, Your Grace?" Riche says in a displeased tone, "If the lady remains on the terrace and her condition worsens, your annoying fiancé can make a show and send for the high priest." Saria humbly bows her head and apologizes. The man stares at the girl with an angry, red-eyed look and says through his teeth that Saint will be escorted to the main church as soon as possible. Then he adds, "I don't want to see any more scandals in the palace," turns around and walks away. The green-haired man looks after him and mentally notes that the Archduke is somewhat cold now. Perhaps the husband did not like the behavior of Saria's fiancé. An evil light flashes in the girl's eyes. She is sure that very soon Riche, like all other men, will fall in love with Saint. But you can't do anything about it. This is the fate of the head of the knights, and it is impossible to change it. It is not even worth trying. The image of the Archduke appears in Saria's imagination. The girl is thinking, Riche, Sviata, Saria, and others have something in common. They are all heroes of a romantic novel in which a girl named Lena moves through space. She enters another world, and the main and minor male characters fall in love with her. As in any story, there is a criminal in the novel. This is a girl who died at the hands of the main characters. The strangest thing is that her body belongs to Saria Stern, the same green-haired lady. The series has inherited the power of God, a very precious and rare gift. The girl also received the title Stern. She is the most blessed person in the entire empire. But this did not stop her from committing various sins. If you ask the opinion of 100 people about her, 150 will describe the girl as a walking disaster of high society. Sometimes she pours wine on someone, then something else. It seems she was born a criminal. The past of the series is quite extravagant. Green hair never worked. The only thing she was doing was making money. Relations with family in Saria did not work out. Both the girl's father and brothers condemned her behavior. They believed that the green-haired girl had crossed all the limits of what was allowed. Therefore, considering Saria's personality, we can say that the girl who ended up in her body was unlucky. By the way, about her. In her past life, she was an ordinary college student. From the moment the girl realized whose body she was in, all her thoughts were focused on the fact that she did not want to die. The green-haired one bites her lip and asks herself, "Why do I have to become Saria out of all the heroes? It's not even that Saria is a criminal. No, at the end of the novel she must die, and the girl in the heroine's body does not want this. Her past life ended too soon. But this time everything will be different. The girl resolutely promised herself to get rid of all the enemies of the series. Of course, in a peaceful way, and she put her plans into practice. For example, the green-haired woman politely apologized to people when she caused them grief, showered her girlfriends and maids with expensive gifts. In a word, she tried to improve the reputation of the series. Bedroom. The green-haired girl sits by her groom's bed and treats his arm with a bandage and healing herbs. The girl asks the young man not to move. He asks Saria where she got these medicines. The green-haired woman calmly answers that she plucked herbs from the mountain near the church. Callus's eyes widen in surprise. He can't believe that Saria risked going off the cliff for him alone. The girl says that she did so. The green-haired girl remembers how she had to climb to the very top of the rock to pluck one unfortunate blade of grass. Of course, then, the girl was afraid of falling. But she did all this for a reason. According to the plot of the novel, it was Callus who killed the series. Therefore, now the girl is trying to please him. Green-haired emerges from his memories and carefully tightens the knot on the bandage. Suddenly, Saria comes up with a brilliant idea. The girl blushes and supports her head with her hand, looking at her groom's hand. Callus, on the other hand, cannot understand what is happening. He sits down on the bed, looks at the girl warily for a few seconds, and then quietly asks, "What are these changes in you connected with?" Saria holds his hand and continues to think about her own. She scrolls through the events that happened in the novel in her head. The same minor character fell in love with Saria. They often spent time together, riding in a carriage, laughing at something, looking at the stars, etc. And one day this hero got down on one knee in front of the green-haired woman and handed her a box with a golden wedding ring decorated with a blue jewel. Then the young man made an offer of his hand and heart to Saria. Then he looked at the girl with a look full of tenderness. The series mentions that the original story ended with the main characters falling in love and Callus committing suicide. The green-haired girl put her hand to her mouth after the young man's words. She looked shocked and happy at the same time. And a second later, the girl threw herself on her lover's neck. The series understands that this would be the perfect ending to the story, so she can at least stay alive. The balcony on which the girl drank tea at the beginning of the story. The series finally stops remembering the past and thinking about the future. She looks at the back of the Archduke, who is going somewhere with his servant. Then Saria leans against one of the columns and mentally asks herself, "If I don't get in their way, won't their love story go better than in the novel?" The girl puts her fragile hand on the tea table and promises herself that she will not get involved in the relationship between the main character and Risha for her own safety. The green-haired one sits down on a chair and starts sipping tea, simultaneously watching his fiancée and Saint. The series is not too embarrassed that these two spend time together, because soon the Archduke will become close to Saint. In a few days, someone's voice comes from the familiar blue room. Oh, Callus plans to get married. It belongs to some girl who was unexpectedly met by a green-haired man. Saria squeezes out a smile, trying to be polite, and says, "Nice to meet you." Her interlocutor turns out to be none other than Saint. The brown-haired girl blinks and cheerfully introduces herself. "My name is Lena." She, without asking permission, takes Saria by the hand and says, "I wanted to meet you so much." Yes, this girl definitely lacks manners. Green-haired squints her eyes and continues to smile so that Saint does not suspect anything. In fact, Saria thinks, "I told you I didn't want to contact them." So the girl breaks the promise she made to herself. The dark-haired girl folds her hands together, tilts her head cutely, and continues, "It's a little confusing, but people call me Saint, all because I came from another world." Saria continues to play the role of a polite lady, smiling sweetly and saying that she has heard of such and such. In fact, the girl thinks that her attempts to avoid the holiday failed miserably. The dark-haired one turns sharply to the side and says as if she heard that there will be a fitting for Saria's wedding dress today. Then the girl asks if it is true. The green-haired one hesitates a bit but answers, "Yes, lady." The series begins to merge even more. She does not understand what kind of old man Sviatya forgot, but she doesn't show it. Meanwhile, Lena keeps tweeting, "A wedding dress from a magical world? How cute." The green-haired man smiles as wide as he can. Only angrily flashing eyes show her real mood and irritation with the saint's behavior. Lena stares at Saria and says, "Oh, Khaleesi's bride." Green-haired is disturbed by these words. Why are this girl and Callus already addressing each other by name? Then Saria clenches her hands into fists, turns her head to the wall and sobs faintly. The girl recalls that it took her as much as 11 months for the groom to allow her to address him by name. Lena does not notice the condition of her interlocutor, and in the same cheerful and carefree tone which so annoys Stern, turns to her. And one more thing, Syria. The green-haired one quickly blinks back tears, touches a strand of her hair, and looking at Saint, politely asks what she wanted. The girl blushes and pronounces the brilliant idea that came to her mind. I would love to see how you will change into a wedding dress. Syria freezes in place from shock and asks the girl, Excuse me? The green-haired girl thinks that Lena's words sounded a little strange. Does she want to see how Callus's bride will undress? Lena folds her hands in a pleading gesture and looks at Syria with puppy dog eyes. Suddenly, someone's voice calls out to the girl. Saint Lena! The designer Begonia, a woman in a dark green dress with blonde hair in a bun, enters the room. She holds a book in her hands and sternly says that trying on a dress is not a theatrical spectacle. The woman walks past a puzzled Lena and adds, Moreover, such a privilege as attending a wedding fitting is only extended to the bride's attendants, close relatives, and closest friends. The designer throws an icy look at the girl, which makes her shudder involuntarily, and notes that in this case none of the above applies to Lena. The dark-haired woman's eyes fill with tears. The girl raises her hand to her mouth, apologizes to Begonia, and says that she still cannot get used to the customs of the new world. Syria, imitating the designer, crosses her arms over her chest and smiles sincerely. She liked how the woman pointed the impudent saint to her place. Come to think of it, Begonia was also a criminal in the original story. Greenhair suggests that at the end of the novel, Callus fired this talented woman for his cruel and perhaps not very fair treatment of Lena. Meanwhile, silence prevails in the room. The designer turns sideways to Lena and puts his hands on the table, trying to calm down. The dark-haired one bows to Syria. Then she looks up at the green-haired man, full of resentment, and sobbing loudly, she says, Okay then, Siri, until we meet again. After that, the girl jumps up and hurries to leave the room. The green-haired one puts his hand to his chest. Lena's behavior is a little disconcerting to Syria because it reminds her of the original story. But after a second, the girl relaxes and smiles sweetly, looking after Lena. The series decides not to pay attention to such strange coincidences, because this time everything will be different. Evening. A light is burning in 2 windows of a huge castle. The voices of 2 people are heard from the room. One of them says, What does this mean? Do you want to change designers? The voice belongs to Syria, who is sitting at a small table opposite her fiancé and discussing all the subtleties of the wedding with him. Callus replies to the girl, You probably already know because you were there when it happened. The guy talks about the recent incident with Lena and designer Begonia. Callus takes a sip of tea and continues, Saint Lena is the one who came down to us from heaven. She is different from spoiled aristocrats. The girl starts to get angry. It seems to her that Callus is mocking her because she was sure that the story would change. But the guy ignores the emotions of the bride and says that the designer, who does not understand the saint's feelings, has no place here. Syria squints and says loudly, Begonia only told her not to turn me into a circus clown. From the nobleman's point of view, Saint Lena's words were not very polite. Callus tries to argue. He says, Only Lena. But the series no longer listens. The girl's eyes begin to burn with anger. She does not understand why her fiancé calls Saint as if this brat is a close person to him. The green-haired man is not going to tolerate such behavior. She straightens her shoulders, grits her teeth, and says, Did you just call Santa by her name right in front of your fiancé? The boy shivers and scratches his nose with his hand in excitement. Now Callus seems to realize that he just blurted out. The young man thinks how to get out. After a few seconds of silence, Callus lowers his head and apologizes to the girl, asking for her understanding. As for the designer, the boy continues, It's all because I was appointed the protector of the saint. Syria measures the guy with a cold look. The girl is very fed up with this situation with her fiancé and the insolent saint, who fell like snow on her head. But for now she restrains herself and remains silent. But the more Callus makes excuses, the more Syria gets annoyed. The girl clutches the skirt of her dress with fingers white with anger. In addition to the boy's behavior, she is worried about the excessive similarity of the current events with the original. In the novel, the divine powers became extremely unstable after Lena got into a new world for her. No matter how cheerful Saint seemed, Traveling the worlds was difficult for her. It took a long time for her to come to her senses, and therefore the high priests of the main church appointed a protector for her among the heads of the 17 houses, who has the power given by God. Callus, the head of the house of Hanaton, became this protector as now. He recommended himself to the saint and always accompanied her everywhere. Considering this, it's only natural that these two grew close rather quickly. After all, Callus was obliged to be by Saint's side all the time and, in case of something, to lend her a helping hand, so to speak. But Saria didn't think that would happen now that Cowis was already engaged to her. The guy stands up and asks the girl, "Were you worried that I didn't mention my role as the protector of Saint Lena?" Callus's expression turns a little sad. Now he feels guilty in front of his fiancée, while Saria thinks that maybe she was too self-confident. But at the same time, the girl understands that she cannot get angry, because then everything can end the same as in the novel. Therefore, Saria tries to calm down and answers in a trembling tone, "No." She closes her eyes, squeezes a smile out of herself, and tells Callus that she understands everything. In her mind, the girl says, "I will not allow myself to die in such a way. I will do everything in my power to stay alive this time." Callus does not sense insincerity in Saria's words and actions. He smiles sweetly back at his bride and says, "What a relief." Then the young man approaches his bride, bends down to her, and rests his forehead against hers. The guy tells the shocked bride, as if he was already scared that she was upset. He breathes on the girl's hair and thanks her for being so understanding and not throwing tantrums for no reason. The young man also calls the green-haired girl "my beloved." After these words, the girl opens her eyes wide and mentally asks, "Love?" The series becomes restless from such an appeal. It's as if she finds herself in a large snowy forest, where the raging wind wants to knock her off her feet and prevent her from getting out. The green-haired man snaps out of this state and curses Callus very quietly. Fortunately, he does not hear her. Suddenly, Callus jumps up sharply, rushes to the exit, pulling on his coat at the same time, and says guiltily, "I have no forgiveness, Saria. Lena's divine powers must have gone out of control again. I must take care of her at once." The girl turns her back to her fiancé and grits her teeth in rage. Not even a day has passed since the last time the young man called Saint by name. And this really pisses off Saria. After some time, the girl walks through the forest, as in her imagination. She wraps herself in a fur coat, trying to hide from the cold wind. Green Hair thinks, "It's so hard to be a good person. I think I can guess why Saria lived as a criminal." Suddenly, someone approaches the girl and says that she looks somewhat tortured. The girl squints at this person in surprise. Elliot, a fair-haired, blue-eyed boy, the commander of the Knights of House Berg, turned to Saria. A young man in knight's armor puts his hand to his chest and says, "I heard you are sick. Looks like today's glacier survey is tiring you out." The girl replies that it is her duty. The boy and the girl were just talking about the huge glacier located on the territory of the Berg family. It is called the Grave of Monsters. The Berg House, whose coat of arms depicts a howling wolf, was ordered to periodically check the condition of the barrier around the glacier. These are not the Emperor's whims but security measures. They are needed to prevent the appearance of scary and fierce monsters with burning red eyes. But for this, only observing the glacier is not enough. The Berg family needed the power of the gods, which the Sterns, in particular, Saria, possessed. In the original story, the green-haired girl sometimes delayed her trip to the lake. Controlling the condition of the glacier did not interest her at all. When the servants notified Saria of another inspection, she simply waved them off. But now the girl is correcting the mistakes of the past, so she decides to be present at all observation sessions. After all, if Saria wants to improve her situation and survive, she should fulfill her duties like Stern. Elliot notices the girl's thoughtfulness and mistakenly thinks that the girl has become ill. He asks her worriedly, "Why don't we get this over with today and go back?" Duties are duties, but the girl does not want to stand in the cold for a few more hours, so she almost agrees to this offer, having previously asked, "Are you sure?" Suddenly, a man approaches the couple and calls Saria. This is Archduke Richer himself, but his appearance does not really impress the green-haired man. She turns her head in his direction and casually asks, "What are you doing here?" Elliot, unlike the girl, is a little afraid of Rich and stammeringly greets him. The Archduke ignores the young man and continues to speak to the green-haired woman. For the sake of all that is holy, Lady Ceres. The girl opens her eyes wide from such rudeness. She had by no means expected that the Archduke would allow himself to speak to her in such a tone. Richer takes a step towards the Ceres. A crazy blizzard begins. The warm cloaks of the Archduke and the commander are blowing nicely in the wind. The Ceres is silent. This angers the Archduke. He grits his teeth, narrows his red eyes, and angrily says to the green-haired, "Didn't you hear what I said?" The girl smiles, trying to be friendly, and stutteringly apologizes to the Archduke, asking what she did wrong. The man is somewhat reassured by the girl's politeness, but he is still angry. A second later, Richer turns to Saria again. "What made you go to the lake in winter while you are suffering from a cold?" The green-haired woman sighs, thanks her husband for his concern, and adds that she is not so sick now as to refuse to look at the glacier. Then the girl angrily blinks her eyes and calmly, but with a note of anger in her voice, says, "And also, this is my duty as stern." The man lowers his head. He does not like the impudence of this girl. Who is he and who is she? Collecting his thoughts, Riche asks Saria, "Since when did you start talking about your duties so seriously?" Meanwhile, Commander Elliot silently watches the Archduke and Lady Ceres argue. He does not dare to interfere, because he perfectly understands that he can fall under the hot hand of one of these two. Riche defiantly puts one hand on her waist and asks the angry green-haired man, "Isn't this just an attempt to attract your fiancée's attention with her illness?" After these words, Elliot decides to protect the girl. He turns indignantly to the Archduke, waving his hands. Sweat runs down the young man's face. But Saria doesn't give a word to Parubkov. She can stand up for herself. The girl hits her chest with her fist and tells Risha that she has no such intentions. The Archduke listens patiently to the green-haired man. But she continues, "No matter how sick I am, my fiancé will never put your palace on his ears." The man crosses his arms over his chest and asks the girl, "Do you think so because of Saint and her close association with Lord Callis?" The green-haired man does not understand what Riche means. Suddenly it occurs to her that the Archduke hinted that Callis and Saint are connected by love, and not just a working relationship. The girl opens her eyes wide when she realizes this. Then she convinces herself that the Archduke is just mocking her. The girl turns away from Riche and asks herself, "How? How dare he say that?" The man understands that this conversation will not lead to good. He exhales through clenched teeth and decides to leave the green-haired woman who talks to him so brazenly in peace. Now he finally turns to the commander. "Are you done with the inspection?" He answers with enthusiasm in his voice, "Yes, Your Grace." The boy and the man depart a little from the Ceres. Elliot says that thanks to Lady Ceres' diligence, their team was able to finish the job in no time. The boy raises his finger and looks at the green-haired man. Then he continues to say cheerfully to the Duke, "And the truth is, without her help, everything could have taken half a day longer." The girl looks at the Archduke with displeasure. She wonders who this stony-faced man thinks he is, if he allows himself to behave so domineeringly and proudly. The Archduke says something to the commander. The Ceres calms down a bit. "Okay, I guess it's all because he's the male lead, and very handsome, but why does he have to be such a bastard?" The man seems to hear the girl's thoughts and stares at her. Then he turns back to the commander and says that it is time for them to go back. The guy, smiling, answers, "Yes, Your Grace." The Ceres abruptly turns away from the man. The girl looks very excited. She and the Archduke almost met their eyes. The green-haired one burns with shame and tries to hide under his fur coat. The Archduke turns his gaze to the girl again and says mockingly, "We can't afford to worsen precious Lady Stern's frail health." Now it's the man's turn to turn away from the girl. He and the commander head for the exit of the forest, leaving Saria behind. The green-haired man is speechless from shock. The Ceres, which is already pretty cold, begins to rub their hands against each other, trying to warm up a little. She looks at the ground and wonders why the Archduke is showing such concern after so many remarks. The area near the Archduke's palace, where Saria lives. The green-haired girl, dressed in a lavender dress, stands by the trees and thinks about how Riche feels about her. Maybe he likes the girl more than she herself assumed. The Ceres rests on a marble handrail. Thoughts raced through her head at breakneck speed. "However, I would like to avoid him as much as possible. There's something about him. He's very creepy." The girl shuffles her dress on the cobblestones. She just wants to get the wedding over with as soon as possible so she can finally get out of here. After all, there is only one reason why the green-haired one is now in the palace of Archduke Richer, one of the members of the Berg family. The fact is that the people of Stern are considered such sacred figures within the empire that they can only participate in important ceremonies, such as the exchange of wedding vows, in a limited number of places. The possessions of the Berg family belong to such places. These are territories with a harsh climate where giant glaciers are located. By the way, members of the Berg family not only observe the ice depths, but also protect the ice lake. The series is getting very cold. She is not used to the weather when the frost takes to the bones. The girl sighs loudly and wraps herself in a warm shawl. At the same time, the green-haired woman curses the romance in which she found herself. She looks down at the ground with a sad look and says to herself that she wanted to avoid the wedding at Berg Palace at all costs. And not even because of dislike for the Archduke. It's just that in the original story, this is where Lena and Richer, the two main characters, got married at the end of the story. As it turned out, Lena, this cheerful, dark-haired girl from another world, is actually stern, just like the criminal of the novel. The green-haired one squats down, raises his hand to his face and ponders. I know, she's the main character, but still, isn't the story too formulaic? Saints and stern? No wonder Saria from the original was so jealous of her. Then the girl gets up and walks towards the castle. She tries to calm herself down, saying that the fact about Lena's true origin was revealed only at the end of the novel. So it is enough for Saria to just get married and quietly disappear from the palace. Suddenly someone calls out to the girl, lost in her thoughts. Ma'am? Saria opens her eyes wide in surprise and turns her head to the person who just addressed her. When she sees who it is, she joyfully exclaims, Bibi. A dark-haired, brown-eyed girl dressed in all black is standing in front of Saria. Her full name is Abigail Orion. She is the personal knight of the series. The girl is very happy to see her friend. She grabs her hands and begins to bombard her with various questions. How was the monster trip? When did you come back? Bibi smiles sweetly and asks the green-haired man not to speak so fast. Saria leans over to the girl and whispers ominously, You didn't accidentally kill anyone, did you? The green-haired woman asks this question because Bibi was an assassin in the past. The girl laughs and tells the lady that she does not touch anyone except criminals. Bibi pulls away from Saria a bit and says, All went well, though I was sad without you when my armor became ice-cold, my lady. The green-haired man lowers his head. She feels a little guilty for not going on the campaign with Bibi and the other knights. That's where the powers of the series could really come in handy. After all, one of the main reasons why this world needs stern people so much is star steel, from which armor is made. Star armor is considered one of the best. They protect their owners from being poisoned by magic. Members of the Stern family are held in high esteem by knights fighting demonic creatures. Without their intervention, the body temperature of the soldiers would decrease during prolonged contact with the armor. Bibi throws her warm black cloak over the bewildered Saria and tells the girl, You should hurry and go inside the palace. Otherwise you risk catching a cold. After these words, not very pleasant memories rolled over the green-haired man. She mentions the Archduke, who recently spoke about her health. The girl looks away, blushes a little and thinks, So his words were just a concern. After all, I'm still precious stern. All this time, Bibi is watching Saria in amazement. The green-haired one notices this and, to avoid unnecessary questions, smiles sweetly and invites Bibi to come inside, adding that she wants to hear about her knight's adventures. In her mind, the girl says, I should prove my worth. Saria wants to put his intentions into action before Lena learns her true origins. By the way, Saint is just watching the green-haired girl and Bibi through the window. Lena leans her hand against the glass and looks carefully at the couple. The girl does not even blink because she is afraid of missing something important. Saint's teacher, a man with long black hair, notices his lady's interest. He says that the lady series has changed a lot over the past year. She began to communicate more closely with Marquis Hanaton, Lena's protector and her fiancé. The saint, dressed in a delicate peach-colored dress, turns to face the teacher and asks him why Callus's bride is visiting the glacier. The man calmly replies that Saria belongs to the Stern family, and only members of this respected family can perform the ritual of cleaning the barrier near the lake. Dark-haired listens to the teacher in silence. He continues, Recently she has earned the respect of the entire palace for diligently performing her duties. Lena notices that the green-haired man is laughing sweetly at something. The look of the saint becomes somewhat angry. She doesn't seem to like that the teacher and other people are giving such praise to Syria, who recently insulted her. Lena then says that she is jealous of the green-haired one, because she has so many privileges thanks to her last name. The teacher carefully asks the girl, "Excuse me?" Instead of an answer, Lena asks him a counter-question. The stern title, "Can I have it?" The man begins to get nervous after these words and stuttering answers the girl that she is already considered a saint. Lena turns her back to the window, crosses her arms over her chest and says with envy that the surname Stern sounds more dignified. In addition, a girl from this family possesses magic that is inaccessible even to a person with divine power. The teacher wants to distract Lena, so he cheerfully says, "Soon there will be a lavish welcome party in your honor. Although, of course, you should first learn all the necessary rules of etiquette." However, the girl does not listen to the man at all. She again touches the glass with her fingers and thinks about herself. Nevertheless, not everyone can become them. All Sterns are children of divine power born in winter. Each of them has a star mark on their body. The girl loses her mind and comes to the conclusion that she is simply very jealous of the Stern family, in particular Syria. But despite this not very good feeling, Lena's face radiates sadness, not anger. Siri's room. The girl is still in a luxurious four-poster bed. A maid is sitting next to her. She says to the green-haired one, "It's your birthday soon, Lady Ceres." The maid then lifts a spoonful of cold syrup to the girl's mouth and clarifies about the birthday. "Winter Wednesday, I mean." The green-haired girl smiles and says that she was very busy, so she completely forgot about it. Yes, the Stern series was born on a Winter Wednesday. A person must meet several conditions to receive this title. One of them is to be born on a Winter Wednesday. A child born on Monday has a beautiful face. A child born on Tuesday is gifted with God's grace. Children born on Wednesday are less fortunate. They are full of sadness. The melancholic nature of Syria, who likes to look out the window for a long time, confirms this. But children born on Thursday are overflowing with all the love of the future. A child born on Friday is kind and merciful. The series looks outside and wonders if this distribution of qualities is fair to those who came into this world on Wednesday. In the original novella, the green-haired girl thought that the lines of the poem were really unfair when she heard them in church. Then she, offended at the world, turned and left without waiting for the end of the service. However, waking up as Stern, the girl loved her birthday. The series officially became Stern on her 15th year, when the awakening of her spiritual powers was revealed by the appearance of a star-shaped mark on her neck. She immediately dropped the name Keladin and began using her new title with pride. Because of this, her already strained relationship with her family only worsened. The girl remembers this and sighs sadly, closing her eyes. The maid says to her mistress, "Sviata continues to be excessively interested in the constellation stone. This is quite disturbing." The girl immediately snaps out of her thoughts and opens her eyes wide in surprise. She then asks the maid if it's safe for Lena to get so close to the constellation stone before her powers stabilize. The maid puts her hand to her chest and says that Saint is a very inquisitive person. The series is not annoyed by these words, but on the contrary, amused. She smiles faintly and somewhat self-confidently. Yes, Lena has a ton of curiosity, which was to be expected from the main character. Suddenly, the girl is again visited by thoughts about the excessive similarity of this story with the original. Although she woke up like Stern after touching the stone. The green-haired one shakes the dress's hand and immediately rejects these assumptions. Syria lowers her head and looks angrily at her knees. The girl tells herself that she should stop worrying about it so much. Once the wedding is over, she'll just have to live quietly in Callus's house. Then nothing will happen. Green-haired plans to do so but does not succeed. For some reason, she runs into Archduke Richer very often. The events that took place in the storage of garden herbs a few minutes ago are shown. Medium thick branches of some trees lie on a small table. The green-haired woman, wearing brown gloves so as not to accidentally injure herself, takes one of the branches in her hand and looks at it carefully, thinking that these silver laurel branches are simply amazing. After a few seconds, the girl carefully places the branch on the parchment and says to herself, "If starlings were a plant, wouldn't they look the same?" Silver laurel branches have the power to both strengthen and cleanse the barrier. Without them, it is impossible to view the glacier. Also, These parts of the trees are used by the knights as a substitute for the sterns, when they are unable to help them. The girl presses the bundle with her wealth to her chest and smiles happily. She is in a great mood today. Saria is even thinking of asking Bibi to go with her to see the glacier today. Suddenly, someone with green hair suddenly enters the room and crashes into the green-haired person. The girl screamed out of surprise and pain. One tear even runs down her cheek. Archduke Richer turns out to be an uninvited guest. He doesn't even apologize to the girl. Instead, the man tells Saria that she seems to be in a good mood. The green-haired one says, "Your Highness?" The girl bows before the Archduke, greeting him. Silver laurel branches begin to fall from the scroll in her hands. Saria crouches down and begins to pick up what she's lost while cursing, "Why did they all fall? Grandfather, ha!" The Archduke watches her silently. But then he does something that the girl did not expect from him. He reaches for the branches that have fallen. The series doesn't understand what's going on. The man gets down on one knee and starts collecting branches. Now his face is calm and somehow focused. He asks Green Hair, "Are you going to visit the glacier again?" The girl was so surprised by the Archduke's help that she simply froze in place with a bundle of branches in her hands, unable to utter a word. The man turns to the girl again, trying to bring her out of her stupor. "Lady Saria?" The green-haired man immediately regains consciousness, smiles and answers in a trembling voice. "Oh, yeah." The Archduke continues to collect the branches in silence for a while, then says, "I'm not sure I understand correctly." The girl asks him what he is talking about. The man's face becomes somewhat gloomy. He tells Saria that as far as he knows, her rooms have been well taken care of by the best servants. The girl is even more surprised and uncertainly asks the Archduke another question. "Do you still consider me humiliated?" Green Hair really does not understand what this man means. Reach stands up abruptly and looking into Saria's eyes says, "Otherwise I don't see any other reason why you are surveying the glacier with such eagerness." The girl does not know how to respond to this attack, so she just stares at the Archduke. The man is satisfied with this reaction. He bows his head, smiles slyly at the corner of his mouth, and asks the green-haired girl if her recent visits to the glacier have caused her to want something. The girl tries to justify herself, but the Archduke interrupts her. "Every time you visit my palace, you run wild when you don't like something." These words hit Saria in the very heart. She leans forward a little. It makes her sick to think that the Archduke might bite her. The man continues to finish off the girl. "More than 100 servants are chained to the bed after serving you." Saria decides not to give up, so she clenches her hands into fists and, smiling widely, tells the man that with her behavior she is trying to atone for the suffering of those 100 unfortunate people. This trick seems to have worked. The Archduke hums quietly and says to the girl, "You really are a real mystery. Perhaps I shall be sorry when you go to Hanaton's house." Out of shock, Saria again almost drops the bundle of branches from her hands. The girl has many questions for this man in her head. Regret? For whom? After this guy? The green-haired girl looks confused. She does not understand Risha's behavior. Sometimes he makes fun of her, then he says that he will regret it. The man and the girl look at each other in silence. What does it all mean? Several hours pass. Saria is sitting in a chair and drinking tea. The girl calmed down a little, but she still can't get that strange meeting with Richer out of her head. The green-haired man opens his eyes wide and asks himself what is going on. Saria is pulled out of her thoughts by two maids standing by the table with some boxes. "Ma'am, your wedding gifts have just arrived, look at them." They show the girl a sapphire which was sent by the Marquis of Hanaton himself, Saria's fiancé. Maids rave about this gem. How crystal clear, and the color is deep. But the green-haired man is not very interested in what Marquis Hanaton has sent there. She stares into her cup of tea and runs through the Archduke's words about feeling sorry for her. The girl raises the cup to her lips and smiles faintly. She thinks, "I felt as if I was given some kind of guarantee that everything would happen as it should. It seems that I am still far from a tragic end." Having convinced herself that everything will be fine, the girl decides to start her wedding. The series turns to face the maid. Ta hands the girl a small box and says that she brought the bracelet that the lady asked for. A second later, the girl is already holding a golden bracelet decorated with purple and blue crystals. Saria smiles gently and says, "Callus has given me so much that I would like to repay him in kind." The maids immediately start fussing and quietly laughing after these words. They consider their lady's decision very romantic and cute. Syria sighs loudly, not even trying to argue with the maids. She carefully puts the bracelet back in the box and thinks about Lena. The girl wonders if the saint found the deposit with the magic crystals in the original story. The girl blinks and thinks, until that happens, they will be considered extremely valuable. I'm sure he'll like it. Suddenly the door opens. A fair-haired girl, one of the closest servants of the series, flies into the room. She shouts, "Disaster!" The green-haired girl and the maid standing next to her simultaneously turn their heads towards the maid, waiting for details from her. The blonde, panting from running, tries to say something. "Holy, Lady Lena." Finally, the maid gets out a full sentence. She passed out after touching the constellation stone. Not only that, the stone itself became transparent and began to shine. The series is very surprised by these words. They don't make you angry. They don't annoy you. They don't make you angry, but they surprise you. The girl freezes in place and slightly opens her mouth. She understands that this event can only mean one thing. A new stern appeared. Meanwhile, Lena herself does not even suspect that they are talking about her. The dark-haired girl is lying on a soft bed with her arms crossed over her chest. The room in which Saint is. The maids are running around the dark-haired one. Syria enters. She couldn't help but visit Lena. Near the saint's bed, the girl sees her fiancé, who gently holds the dark-haired man's hand. Lena winces from the pain coursing through her body. Syria stops a few meters from the newlywed Stern's bed and says to herself, "This doesn't make sense. We are still only at the beginning of the story. Lena's awakening as Stern happened near the end. Is it true?" After some time, another person enters the room. Archduke Richer. The maid and the doctor bow to him. The man asks about the saint's condition. The doctor replies, "Fortunately, the worst is behind us thanks to the personal presence of the Marquis of Honiton." Rich walks deep into the room without even stopping to listen to the doctor. Syria glances at her fiancé and realizes that Callus hasn't even noticed her presence. Marquis Honiton really doesn't pay attention to the girl. He looks at Lena in silence. The doctor runs up to the Archduke, who is looking at Syria's back, and informs him of the appearance of a new stern. Richer doesn't seem too happy about this news. The man purses his lips and says, "Saint Lena will surely repay you for the kindness shown to her." With these words, the Archduke hints to the doctor that it is time for him to go. There is silence in the room. Riche approaches Syria, leans against the wall and asks the girl if she suffered the same way when Stern woke up. The girl answers with a trembling voice, "No, Your Highness. My divine power is not as great as hers." The Archduke angrily blinks his eyes and turns to the servants. So, the saint could not possibly not know that her body is filled with divine power. And yet she has shown obstinacy in her desire to touch the stone, thereby causing a commotion in my palace. The fair-haired maid sighs quietly and tries to justify Saint to the Archduke. Oh well, maybe she never thought that Stern could be. Meanwhile, Lena turns her head in the other direction. The Archduke does not really believe in the girl's innocence. Did you touch without thinking? The saint knew that it was dangerous to touch the stone because of its unstable divine power. Riche then begins to speak to the man with long black hair, Lena's teacher. "Are you in charge of Saint's training?" The teacher shuddered, but gave the Archduke an affirmative answer. Riche asks the man, cowering in fear, why Saint did such a thing. The teacher pauses and says, "She must have felt admiration for Lady Syria." The green-haired man is shocked by these words. She looks at Saint's teacher with wide eyes, not believing that Lena thought she was cool. The teacher sees the girl's reaction and hurries to make amends. "Of course, it's only my fault, Your Grace." The Archduke is pleased that the man will admit it. The series wonders if Lena really touched the stone because she admired her, the criminal of the affair. Or maybe Saint Simple wanted to check if she was stern. Who knows? In the original story, Lena touched the constellation stone by accident. Her divine power burst forth with such power that it almost became her undoing. But the truth that she is a stern could not be hidden from the world. Is it possible that the dark-haired girl touched the stone on purpose this time because of her fascination with Syria? But this was not the case in the original novel. The green-haired man shuddered at the realization. Did she manage to change the plot of the novel? Will she not die? Her thoughts are interrupted by the voice of a boy addressing the Archduke. He literally flies up to the man and excitedly tells him that Saint has regained consciousness. This guy with blonde hair and purple eyes is Lenin, Richburg's chief assistant. The Archduke sharply turns towards the door and says, Well, it's time for us to go. Lenin tries to stop the man. Be your honor, shouldn't you at least approach her? He barely has time to finish when Richer measures him with a murderous gaze. The man says that he is not Saint's nanny and is not obliged to deal with her. For this, the girl has a protector, a teacher and servants. The assistant folds his hands together and tells his master that it is worth going at least for the sake of relations with the high priests. Rish exhales loudly. He understands that Lenin will not let go of him just like that, so he agrees. The Archduke then turns to Saria, who has been silently watching him all this time. Shouldn't we visit the feast together, Lady Saria? After all, now she is your colleague Stern. The girl lowers her head and swallows nervously. She does not know whether to accept Rich's proposal. On the one hand, she is pleased that this man cares for her. On the other hand, Saria doesn't really want to see Lena now. By Lena's bed, Callus, who did not take a single step away from the girl, sees that she has finally come to her senses and shouts, Lena! It can be seen that the boy is very excited. The dark-haired one lies with half-open eyes and squints at Callus. The girl is already a little better, but she still feels very exhausted. The boy asks Saint, Have you come to your senses? The girl barely audibly asks him, Lise? It seems that Lena is slowly beginning to understand where she is and what is going on. The girl complains to the boy that she is very hurt. He tries to cheer her up. Don't worry, Lena, everything will be fine, I'm with you. The Archduke, Saria, Lenin, Bibi, and a priest are watching this spectacle. Green-haired is very upset by the behavior of Callus. Bibi notices this, leans over to her mistress and quietly asks her if she should cut off the man's arms. The Archduke looks at Saint and Callus with a look as if he is about to get bored. The man hurries to call the priest. A man in church clothes approaches Rish and waits for further instructions. The Archduke, without turning his face to the priest, says that everyone is very busy at Berg Manor in winter. Rish then points his hand at Saint and continues, I no longer have the ability and desire to keep such a headache in my palace. There is complete silence in the room. Saria turns her head towards the Archduke and looks at him with wide eyes. In her mind, the girl asks herself, did he just call her a headache? Richer puts his hand on his belt and asks his assistant to send a letter to the main temple that Saint Lena will be sent back as soon as her condition improves. Lenin bows to the master and promises to carry out the order. Suddenly, Callus, who is still sitting by the saint's bed, tries to contradict the Archduke. He stands up and says to Risha, Isn't that too much? She didn't choose to be bedridden. Saint tries to stop the boy. But he does not listen to her and is even more angry. He raises his eyebrows and shouts, And to call a sick person a headache? Callus seems to have been very moved by the Archduke's words. Surprisingly, Risha is not angered by the boy's passionate speech in defense of the saint. The man says in a mocking tone, Have mercy, Marquis of Honiton. The Archduke smiles suggestively and asks the boy, Can't I speak in my own palace as I wish? Don't forget. But Callus does not stop arguing with a man who is higher than him in terms of status. What's more, it's quite rude. After all, she is sick. The Archduke tilts his head to one side and calmly says to the boy, It's very good that you remembered the word sick. You keep using it. Then Rish says something that no one, especially Saria, expected from him. He reminds Callus that his bride's condition is also far from ideal. The green-haired man lowers his eyes to the floor. The Archduke continues, Haven't your priorities been greatly skewed? You care about someone else's girl more than your own bride. Callus abruptly stops. Richer adds that if the guy continues to behave like this, people may mistakenly think that he is marrying Saint. Callus finally turns his attention to the green-haired man. Parabok says, Ceres. The girl tightly presses her lips. Tears appear in her eyes. Saria feels like she's bursting into tears right now. Rish tells the fair-haired youth that his bride is still here. The green-haired one looks at the trembling groom and thinks, This is not Richburg, but I should be angry with Callus for taking care of another girl. But she always endured all insults in silence in order to avoid the fate of Saria from the novel. Meanwhile, the Archduke proudly says this will be the first stern wedding ceremony they've held here in a while. And despite all the disagreements between the bride and groom, they are obliged to observe sacred traditions. Syria listens to all this and wants to fall through the ground. She is about to cry. Different thoughts are raging in the green-haired woman's head. The girl wants to return home. She just wants to live a peaceful life. But it seems Callus and Lena are going to thwart her plans. Syria closes her eyes and says very quietly so no one can hear, "Let this all end as soon as possible, please." Suddenly, the Archduke extends his hand to the girl and addresses her. "Milady!" The green-haired man looks at the man with hope and shock in his eyes. Richa asks the girl if it's time for them to bow out and get out of here. Such an act of the Archduke surprises not only Syria, but also Callus. The boy freezes in place and looks intently at his bride and the Archduke. The girl does not respond to the man. Riche, who is already starting to lose patience, explains to Syria that the saint needs peace, and invites the girl to go with him. You can see contempt for someone in the girl's eyes. She is silent only because she is waiting for some reaction to Rich's words from her fiancé. Callus does not move away from Lena, but raises his hand in the air and says, "Ceres." But Sviat does not allow the boy to agree, who begins to cough and call for his defender. Callus immediately shifts his gaze to the dark-haired girl and asks the girl if everything is okay with her. The Archduke realizes that Syria will never wait for even a drop of attention from her fiancé and decides to act. He takes the girl's hand. The green-haired man examines the man's palm. Rich slightly lifts Syria's fragile hand and says to her, "Milady, shall we go?" The girl is no longer going to endure humiliation from her fiancé, so she agrees. The Archduke and Syria turn and walk towards the exit of the room. The green-haired woman's expression is focused and sad at the same time. Callus tries to stop Riche and Syria, but his husband and girlfriend don't listen to him. Storage of garden herbs. The series carefully folds the silver laurel branches into a roll. After some time, the girl finishes her work, takes the roll in her hands, and goes somewhere. Now she is not thinking about branches at all. The girl remembers the behavior of her fiancé a few hours ago, when she and the Archduke visited the saint. In the girl's imagination, a picture appears of Callus sitting by Lena's bed and convincing the dark-haired girl that everything will be fine. The green-haired man closes his eyes, trying to get rid of unpleasant memories. Callus was talking so sweetly to Saint, but he hadn't said a word to her since yesterday. The Archduke enters the vault. He walks decisively towards the girl, saying, "Lady Ceres." Greenhaired is frightened by the unexpected appearance of this man. Syria wails and then greets Riche. Memories come flooding back to her. She remembers how the Archduke saved her from shame by offering to go with him. As she pondered whether to accept the offer or not, the girl presses a bundle of branches to her chest and lowers her eyes to the floor. She feels a little ashamed, because she never thanked her husband for his care properly. Riche looks at the bookcase and asks the girl, "Your Grace, will you be able to inspect the glacier after what happened yesterday?" The green-haired man opens his eyes wide in surprise. She is silent and tries not to look at her husband. The Archduke continues, "If you're going to the glacier just to escape, why not just stay in the outhouse for a while instead?" The series tightens the curl. The Archduke seems as surprised as the girl by what he just said. The green-haired woman wants to defuse the situation and tells her husband that she will continue to fulfill her duties in good faith. Then the girl smiles widely but insincerely squints her eyes and adds, "I didn't even have the thought of taking this lightly. First of all, I am stern." The Archduke thinks that the girl misunderstood him and was offended, so he tries to say otherwise. But the husband does not have time to agree. He is interrupted by Callus, who calls out to his bride. He holds on to a large wooden cabinet with his black-gloved hand and tells Syria unhappily that he's been looking everywhere for her. The Archduke does not like Callus's behavior. He turns to the boy. "Am I invisible to you, Marquis Hanaton?" The fair-haired man measures the Duke with a disdainful look. His attitude towards Riche had changed after yesterday, but the young man is not going to show it. Now is not the time to quarrel with any man. Callus puts his hand on his waist and says, "I apologize for my rudeness, Your Grace. I just couldn't find my bride anywhere." Then the boy turns his gaze to Syria and adds that he did not expect to find the two of them in such a secluded place. Green-haired looks at the groom in a daze. How dare he reproach her for something, if he himself recently flirted with someone else's girl? The Archduke ignores the young man's outburst, and instead offers Syria to leave here. At the same time, he deliberately addresses the girl unofficially, by name. The man does this to anger Callus. Finally, Riche gives the blonde an angry look and says, I don't recall ever giving you permission to enter this vault. The Archduke innocently asks the boy if he knows that no one but Stern can enter here without the special permission of the owner of this palace. The boy lets out a defiant laugh and, gesticulating actively, tells Rish that he will be happy to make up for all the damage as soon as he returns to his lands. Callus adds, "If you know the specific amount, then." But the young man does not have time to finish. The Archduke, quite enraged by the young man's insolence, begins to approach him. Risha stops at a distance of a few steps from the young man and tells him, "You forget. It is not for you to choose your punishment. We will follow the traditions of the Berg House." Callus asks in surprise, "Traditions?" The Archduke raises his hand and pronounces the Berg family's traditional punishment for such acts. "One of your hands must be cut off at the wrist." Richie leans over to Callus with an evil smile and asks the young man what he would say to that. But the boy is not afraid of the man. The blonde blinks his eyes and sarcastically replies, "Didn't know you needed my hand, your grace." Callus then asks Rish, "Do you want war between our houses?" The man, barely restraining himself, tells the Marquis, judging by his behavior, only he needs the war. The series, which all this time stood aside and did not interfere in the conversation of these two, begins to worry. She thinks, will they fight in the winter just to prove their prowess? Are we all going to die of cold? The Archduke raises his eyebrows and tells the young man that if he is so willing to fight, Berg will be happy to answer, and this answer will be tough and decisive. Rich pulls him away. When the disgruntled man turns his head, the green-haired woman politely says that her fiancé has indeed behaved very rudely. But to start a war over such trifles is very cruel to knights who are already busy guarding the bodyguard. Reach looks at the girl and calms down a little because she really says smart things. Killing people because of quarrels with some insolence is a very stupid decision. Syria slowly lets go of the man's cloak and in a pitiful tone, bowing his head, says, "Your Grace, please show the same affection you have shown to the Stern family, to the family of my Heniton." The girl also promises Risha that her fiancé will swear never to say anything derogatory again. Callus, who hears these words, involuntarily shivers. He does not like that Sira has sided with the Archduke. Callus approaches his bride and measures her with an angry look. The boy barely restrains himself from shouting at the blonde. He asks Syria if she wants to say something. The girl silently goes outside. The weather is cold but sunny. Callus catches up to the green-haired man and yells, "Siri, stop! I'm talking to you. You think you can just run away?" The Ceres does not react to the young man in any way. Callus looks at the girl's long hair and tries to coo at her. The boy reminds Syria of how she shamelessly grabbed the Archduke's cloak. The young man also adds, "And now you are behaving tactlessly only because you are angry." After these words, the girl finally stops by the tree, turns to her fiancé and asks him, "So you want to say that I'm the only one who behaved tactlessly?" Callus approaches the girl, waving her arms, and asks her to calm down. He tries to justify his behavior yesterday. The guy says that he supported Lena because she is sick and she has no one but him. Then the young man does the unacceptable. He roughly grabs the green-haired woman's hand and angrily asks if she can understand at least this. An evil light flashes in Syria's eyes. She replies that she understands everything. Callus says to the girl, "And you show it like that? Are you angry? Spend time with another man and no longer look me in the eye like before?" The green-haired one shuffles her dress across the cobblestones and nonchalantly tells the boy that he used to do the same. But Callus does not want to admit the truth. He says that these are two different situations, because Lena was sick. The girl pulls her hand out of the boy's hand, but he quickly catches it. Outraged, Syria almost screams, "Yes, they are different, because I, unlike some, did not call the Archduke by his name in front of my fiancé." Then the green-haired girl pulls herself together and as calmly as possible asks Callus to let go of her hand. The guy asks to listen to him. The girl angrily looks somewhere to the side. She has already listened enough. The Ceres decides to act. She abruptly drops the young man's hand from hers. Callus is shocked and at the same time angry by this behavior of the girl. He yells, "Cereal!" The green-haired one lowers his head and says, "I told you to let go." Tears of pain appear in the eyes of the girl. The fact is that she jerked her arm so hard when she tried to get rid of Callus that she hit it against a tree. The guy leans over to the girl and addresses her. He is no longer angry but looks scared. It seems that the boy is shocked by the state of his bride. He asks the green-haired one, "How could you pull your hand out so suddenly? You hit her against a tree." Syria clutches her wounded hand, which is bleeding, and tells the boy that, if she were him, she would ask to break off their engagement. The girl adds that it will be better for everyone if Callus leaves her and proposes to the person he really loves, Saint. Bewildered, the boy asks Syria what she just said. Callus pretends not to understand what the girl is talking about. He says indignantly to his bride, "How could you think that? You're the only one I love." The girl turns away from the young man, about to leave, and says in a voice full of resentment, "Who will believe a man who gently holds the hand of another girl in front of his bride?" Callus calls out to the green-haired man. Syria gives him a sad look and thinks, yes, the girl was not head over heels in love like the heroine of a romance novel, but she really liked Callus. Green-haired wanted to marry this guy and live with him in harmony. In the original story, a young Heniton kills Syria and commits suicide after failing to win Lena's heart. In general, Callus and Ciri have quite similar fates. Since the novel's main characters have a happy ending, wouldn't it be right if these two also enjoy a bit of happiness? Syria is afraid that she and Callus will have to die. That is why she reacts so sharply to the communication of her fiancé with Saint. Tears begin to flow down the green-haired girl's cheeks. The girl tells Callus that he doesn't know anything. The boy looks at the green-haired man in shock and does not know what to say. He looks confused. The boy did not expect that his bride, who a few minutes ago could have killed anyone within her reach, would cry. The girl presses her hands to her chest and says, "Don't you understand how scared I am every time I see you next to her?" The green-haired one cannot hold back and starts sobbing. Her body trembles. Callus gently calls out to his bride in an attempt to calm her down. The young man says quietly, "I didn't want to bring you to tears. I'm sorry, Syria. I'm really sorry." Callus scratches the back of his head in confusion. In the end, he dares to approach the girl. The young man gently asks her not to cry and admits his guilt. Callus then embraces his bride tenderly. Surprisingly, Syria does not break out but sticks into the boy's shoulder. Callus continues to reassure the girl, "Let us go to my estate as soon as we have the wedding." The boy lowers his head and swears with a hint of sadness in his voice that as soon as Saint Lena recovers, he will never see her again. Callus releases the green-haired girl from his embrace, takes her by the hand and promises to be a loyal husband. At the same time, the young man smiles sweetly. This smile finally melts the girl's heart. She thinks that everything will be fine if she believes in her fiancé. The series looks into the young man's eyes for the first time in a long time and says to himself, "After all, trusting him is the easiest way to prevent my heroine's death." The girl then lowers her head and asks Callus to make sure he is not late for their wedding. The blonde says, "You have no reason to worry." The young man smiles, narrows his eyes and says that he would never do that. It is not known. The guy is telling the truth, or he is just trying to get into the girl's trust and then throw her away like an unnecessary toy. Syria smiles from the corner of her mouth. Now she does not want to understand the young man's feelings. She is already tired of being jealous of someone, paying attention to details, enduring insults, and generally limiting herself in everything. A girl just wants to be happy. Evening. The sky changes its color from bright blue to crimson. Archduke Riche Palace. The door to one of the rooms accidentally opened. Someone's conversation is heard. A girl's voice asks somewhat indignantly, "What are you trying to say?" Callus and Lena are in the room. The girl angrily looks at the fair-haired man. The young man lowers his eyes and says seriously, but with a note of sadness, "Today is the last day when we can address each other by name." The dark-haired one humbly folds his hands in front of him and asks the boy if such changes in their communication could be somehow related to the series. Lena smiles and adds, "To tell you the truth, Viscount Eason has already given me a very boring and very long lecture on this matter." Tears appear in the eyes of the dark-haired woman. She says sadly, "I suppose this means we'll be addressing each other as Marquis of Haniton and St. Lena." Callus, wearing a dark gray shirt and a lighter-colored cloak, looks away and says that's just the way it is. The guy also says that it will be difficult for them to continue meeting after the wedding ceremony. Lena quietly says to the young man, "But it's even funny. You are my closest friend. Why should I address you officially?" The guy is silent, not knowing what to answer. Dark-haired continues, "If only we could have met sooner. Maybe everything would have turned out completely differently." Callus says, "Leno." The girl falls silent, looks at the young man's hand and notices a bracelet with magic crystals. The dark-haired one says with interest that she hasn't seen this ornament on Callus before. The guy is glad that Lena changed the subject, so he hurries to support the conversation. He touches the bracelet and says, "Oh, you're quite considerate. It's a gift from Syria." The girl crosses her arms over her chest and pretends to be surprised by the guy's girlfriend. Lena pronounces the name of Callus's fiancé. A second later, the girl says that she would really like to be friends with Syria. Callus is moved by the girl's words. The guy says with regret in his voice, "It is a violation of etiquette to address someone with whom you are not close by name." Saint shuddered. Her lips begin to quiver nervously. It seems that the girl was very angry at what her favorite defender said. So it is. Lena clenches one hand into a fist and shouts, "Etiquette, etiquette, etiquette all the time. How many can you?" Callus stretches his arms forward to catch the girl in case something happens. The saint wrings her hands and asks the young man, "Do you even know how much I have to restrain myself? Can you imagine how difficult it is for me?" Callus tries to calm the dark-haired man down but fails. The girl does not listen to the boy. She begins to cry and becomes even more nervous. "And now the Archduke has said that I will have to go back to the main church. This is terrible. So sad to lose such a close friend like you." Lena doesn't stop, and in a tone as if she's accusing Callus of something, she asks, "Do you even know how many times my world has changed?" The boy does not know what to do and leans a little towards the saint. The girl shouts, "You said that you are my protector. All that talk about taking care of me was a lie?" Then the dark-haired woman sits down on the bright carpet and buries her face in her knees, continuing to complain about Callus. "You never understood how happy I was when I heard those words from you." Callus looks at the gilded gramophone on the window ledge and decides to be by Lena's side today, the day before his own wedding. Lena leans back on the bed and silently looks at the floor. Callie sits down next to the girl and asks her, "Are you feeling a little better?" The dark-haired one nods his head. The girl presses her head to her knees and turns to her protector. "Callus, I want to visit the glacier." The guy looks at Lena in shock and asks why she needs it. Saint collects her thoughts and says in a serious tone, "Now that I am stern, I will be able to help Syria with her duties. Wouldn't that improve our relationship?" The boy tells the dark-haired girl that he can understand her feelings, but she's not in the best condition to see the glacier right now. The girl is dissatisfied with the young man's words. She stands up and looks at him. A second later, Lena says, "Callus, enough arguing, I'll go even if I have to do it myself." In this way, the girl tries to manipulate the man. Callus's expression turns a little more serious. He does not like that Saint treats him like this. After all, he is a marquis, not some servant. In addition, the girl is still under the protection of Heniton. So if, God forbid, something happens to her, Callus will be responsible. However, the boy understands that there is no point in proving something to Lena, so he agrees. The girl claps her hands for joy. The young man stands up and, smiling, tells the dark-haired man that they must do everything as quickly as possible so that no one gets hurt. Lena cheerfully replies, "I give my word." The dark-haired girl is happy because she finally got hers. She and Callus head towards the exit of the room. The young man mentally promises Syria that he will spend time with Saint for the last time. Berg family palace again. The Archduke and his aide discuss the disappearance of Callus and Lena. Richie asks Lenin, "You're saying they left the palace grounds and there was no more news from them?" The aide folds his hands behind his back and answers the Archduke, "Yes, Your Grace. It seems that all contacts with the Marquis have been cut off. It is assumed that they got caught in an unpredictable blizzard and got lost." Richer clenches his fists in rage. It seems to him that Marquis Hannon has lost his mind. Otherwise, how to explain the fact that he spends the last day before his wedding with a girl who is a stranger to him? The Archduke then raised his eyebrows, blinked his eyes, and said angrily, "That abnormal Marquis, is he going to let Lady Syria die?" The man glares at his assistant and says that Callus must have lost his mind. Lenin tries to justify the boy. "Maybe they were just caught by bad weather during the walk, Your Grace." Richer turns away from the window, puts his hand on his belt, and says in a serious tone that there can be no easy when it comes to the Stern wedding. This is not something to be taken lightly. The man looks down at the floor and thinks about the wedding ceremony. If some aspect of timing, venue, or any other rules are not followed properly, the power of Stern will break out. In the worst case, the series will simply die. The Archduke clenches one of his hands into a fist at the realization of what might happen to the green-haired man. Lennon notices this and looks at his master in surprise. Riche folds his arms over his chest and says to himself, "Of course this bastard realizes how dangerous the stern wedding can be. And despite that, he went somewhere right before the ceremony." The man looks out the window, which shows the carriage and the people around it, and wonders if he should beat the crap out of Callus and throw him in jail. Suddenly, the Archduke notices Saria in the window. A fur coat is draped over the girl's shoulders. The green-haired girl is probably going on a long journey if she is dressed so warmly. Riche is surprised by what he saw. He, without taking his eyes off the girl, asks Lennon what Lady Saria is doing with the search party. The assistant puts a hand to her chin and says, "She'll probably be accompanying them because she's worried about her fiancé." The Archduke narrows his eyes. It seems he doesn't really believe Lennon's words. In general, he is alarmed by the behavior of Saria. The man noticed that she had become a completely different person over the past year. Maybe, Riche suggests, it's all because of love. But a second later, the man himself laughs at his stupid and, in his opinion, naive assumption. Riche leaves the room, finally ordering his assistant to tell Saria that she is not allowed to take a step outside the palace. The Archduke's expression is very serious. The man decides to try with all his might to save Saria. The blizzard continues to rage. Saria is in her room and looks out the window. The girl looks at her fiancé. She is very worried about him. The green-haired woman's face is sad and focused at the same time. The girl does not like that the Archduke did not allow her to leave the territory of the palace. Saria clenches her hand into a fist and says to herself, "But how so? I must find Callus before the wedding ceremony begins. There is very little time left." The door to the room opens. A man walks in with water dripping from his boots. The arrival is Bibi, the knight of the series. The black-haired woman greets her lady. Bibi looks very tired. She scratches the back of her head and timidly says, "We had to stop our search for today. The closer we got to the glacier, the stronger the blizzard. We will resume our search as soon as the sun comes up." The green-haired one puts his hand to his chest. The girl is very worried about this news. With a trembling voice, she says that she understands everything and asks Bibi if Callus can come back. Bibi notices her mistress's nervousness. She takes Saria's hand and says, "Milady, the Archduke has asked me to give you a message." Greenhair asks what Riche said. An image of the Archduke appears in Bibi's imagination. His face is angry. The man grits his teeth and says, "You serve Lady Saria, don't you? Give her this message." The series knight is silent for a second, then begins to speak from the Duke's face. "I will drag this bastard to the ceremony, even if I have to tie him up and throw him into the wedding hall." Bibi says this in such a tone that Saria thinks as if the Archduke himself is standing before her. The girl opens her blue eyes wide in surprise. The black-haired one continues, "Even if there is no news for the ceremony, keep preparing calmly." Bibi lets go of the green-haired woman's hand and says that this is what she wants to tell Risha. A second later, she adds that the man's face was really creepy when he said those words. Stern's wedding day, the main church. A large bell can be heard pealing. Saria, dressed in a white dress, stands by the table with a bouquet of red roses in her hands. The girl patiently waits for Callus. The guests whisper among themselves. They are surprised by the absence of the girl's fiancé. Some even think that he ran away with the saint. Some more time passes. Callus is still gone. The whispers in the hall become more outrageous. When will the Marquis of Heniton arrive? Uncle, take it away? He should have been informed about the beginning of the ceremony. I hope that the rumors about him and Saint are lies. Saria's maid, like everyone else, is very nervous. The girl excitedly tells the priest that Callus's alleged relationship with Lena is not the main issue right now. The worst thing about Callus being late is that the series could be seriously affected. Stern's divine power was about to explode and simply tear the green-haired man apart from the inside. Bibi, who heard these words, immediately approaches the maid and grabs her by the shoulder. The black-haired one demands the girl to repeat what she just said. The knight angrily asks what will happen to the power of the series. The maid tries to say something. Suddenly there is a loud sound similar to an explosion. The guests are scared. They close their eyes and scream, unable to even move. This sound comes from the series. The girl starts shaking madly. She is very sick. Someone from the hall, probably Bibi, calls out to the green-haired man. A medium-sized blood stain appears on the floor. Saria stares at her with wide eyes, unable to comprehend what is happening. The green-haired man covers his mouth from which blood is pouring with his hand. The girl falls to her knees. Bibi shouts, "Lady Ceres!" Black-haired rushes to his mistress to help her. But at the last moment, the maid grabs the knight's hand and says, "No, you mustn't touch her." Bibi turns her head in the direction of the blonde and demands to let her go immediately. But the maid is not going to do this. In a serious tone, she says, "It's a stern wedding ceremony. If you touch her now, her divine powers will become more unstable." It turns out that only those who were present at the Oath of Loyalty exchange ceremony can help Syria. The green-haired one gets even worse. The priests begin to fuss and talk about the need to collect all the stern symbols together. The floor is covered in blood. Syria thinks, "Am I really going to die like this? Why? Why? Because I'm a criminal? But I didn't get in the way of the main characters." The girl releases the bouquet from her hands and tries to hold back a furious cough. Green Hair starts to cry. She says to herself, "All I wanted was to live. What, Grandpa, did I do wrong?" Suddenly the hall door opens wide. On the threshold stands the Archduke, dressed in festive attire. The man's gaze is directed at Saria. The girl, choking on tears and blood, looks at Risha and tries to say hello to him. The Archduke is heading to Serie A with determination. The audience tries to stop him. "Your Highness, you must not touch Stern." But the man says, "It looks like we're all going to die soon. Are you going to just stand there and watch?" A second later, Rish is holding a half-conscious Syria in his arms. He looks into the tearful eyes of the girl and addresses her in a calm tone. "Ciri Stern, get a hold of yourself. You can't die. It would be too unfair to die like this."